Hello and welcome to another episode of Monkey Business, the podcast, and you may be viewing this also on YouTube, which is designed to really understand the monkey mind, or what's behind the habits, the success, the outward shows, the behaviors of highly successful or adaptive people, people who have tamed their monkey minds to become kings and queens of their own jungle, or maybe people who've come through adversity and managed to get that chimp back in its cage. And I'm delighted to be joined today from sunny Nottingham. I thought she was in America because it looks so amazing, by Susan Hallam. Hello, Susan. How are you?
I'm very well, Roz. Thank you for having me.
And I was thinking back to when I first met you, Susan. I'm about to read your really wonderful CV. I'm thinking back, though, to when I met you, and I think it was about 2007. So it actually predated your incredible agency, Hallam, I believe. And it was when you were training with Business Link. And I was a marketing director. I'd come back after a gap. I knew good old-fashioned marketing in the 80s and the 90s, and all this internet and online malarkey was frightening me. And I was sent along to a whole series of courses with your very good self. So do you remember that?
I do remember it. We were in Leicester, if you
You
recall,
were.
and actually, I founded the agency in 1999.
So it probably was
So this
just after that then that you found.
quite a bit after
Oh,
that. Yeah,
wow.
yeah. So that's great. I do. That was good. That was a good program.
Absolutely. So thank you. I owe everything and all my presence on social media, including this YouTube video and my podcast, to the foundation that you created. So
I don't know. You always had it in you, Roz. This is it.
I
Yeah,
know that it's
yeah.
bringing it out, Susan. So I'm gonna get you to own some of this along the way, because I saw you interviewed recently, and this amazing CV of yours was read out. And I think at the end of it, you said, "I'm rather embarrassed." So I'd like you not to be embarrassed. I'd like you to revel in
Oh,
this. So I'm going to read it. Susan was awarded an MBE for services to entrepreneurship and innovation in the Queen's Honours in 2018. Also, you were made a Fellow of the Institute of Direct Marketing and named as one of the top 100 CEOs and leaders shaping the digital industry. You're Freeman of the City of London. I have sheep, by the way, just in case you want to borrow them.
yes, please.
And the chairman of Nottingham's Creative Quarter and the deputy chairman of Nottingham Castle. You were born in the USA and you've been in the UK since '85. Here's the bit that I really do know you from, particularly. You are the founder of Hallam, which is one of the UK's top digital marketing agencies. And I know you have so many awards to back this up, particularly the Drum Grand Prix. I believe your agency's won that 3 times. And that's absolutely based on results, isn't it? So it's not just some people in a room deciding that they quite like the look of your agency, but it means you have an amazing creative agency that gets results for their clients. But in 2020, last year, you had an interesting pandemic year because you sold the business, or it had an MBO.
Mhm.
And you have a minority interest, but now technically you're retired, although it does say that you now are doing CEO roles. You're helping leaders make businesses thrive online. You're a consultant and a coach, and obviously have those other trusteeships. So it sounds like a kind of interesting definition of retirement, but I'm really keen to come soon to how that's changed your mindset, how that's changed your identity. But let's just rewind to the beginning of Hallam, really. When you set out to create an agency, and clearly it ended with an MBO, but I know, and you know, because I sold a company, it's a long, slow burn. And what were your real intentions right at the outset, Susan? What was in your mind?
That's a really good question. I come from a family of teachers. My mom's a teacher, my dad was a teacher, Uncle Bill, Aunt Betty, Aunt Ethel, Uncle Jack, all teachers. So I think when I set the company up, I wouldn't really consider myself to be an entrepreneur. And I wouldn't say it was imposter syndrome, but I didn't set it up with the view to the fact I was creating something that would ultimately have an exit plan or an exit strategy. I think, like many people, I set up the company because I loved what I did. I was really good at it. It paid pretty well. And really, I think the main thing, Roz, was I got tired of other people telling me what to do. So I worked for big blue chip companies. And I think the idea of being nimble and free to do what I wanted to do for me was the big spur for setting the company up. But MBO, probably, I didn't even know what that acronym meant when I set the company up.
No, absolutely. So it wasn't like some kind of flag on the top of the mountain. No.
No, for me, it was pretty much just the fact that I just loved what I love. I genuinely do love digital marketing. I still love it today. And I think you just have to be happy in your work. So I think mainly it had a lot to do with happiness quotient. I had two small children. I could spend more time with them. One of the decisions I made when I first set the company up is I did not work the entire month of August. I took time off to be home with my family. So for me, it also just gave me the freedom to kind of pick and choose what I wanted to do.
You said just then, and I've heard you in other interviews say that you think you're almost unemployable, which is great for an entrepreneur, really. I think that's very much the entrepreneur mindset. But why do you think that? What makes you have that view of yourself, Susan?
I think part of it is that probably a few different things. One of the main things, I bet you, like a lot of people listening to this podcast, it's kind of like I'm driven. I know what I love to do, and I just want to get on with it. So to be working somewhere that other people are holding me back, I think is something that I don't enjoy. But as a result, sometimes I think, Roz, that having this kind of drive and this kind of ambition as an entrepreneur doesn't always translate to great leadership and management styles to when you then start to grow a company with 7 employees, 17 employees, 27, 47, 57 employees. So I think that's where I was always really grateful then that I surrounded myself with really clever people who had very, very good management and people leadership skills. So I think in terms of me being unemployable, I just want to do what I want to do and get on with it.
I love that. You've answered actually my next question.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's brilliant. I think we're on a mind here, because I hear you. What you're saying is you're not always that square peg. And I think an entrepreneur is somebody who clearly can do the blue sky thinking and see beyond. But I know from my own business and that great book called The E-Myth that being an entrepreneur and being a manager are often two very, very different things. And I think my next question was going to be, how did you know how to fill the gaps and what the gaps were? But it sounds like to me that you identified that really early on, like, this is not my super duper skill set. This does not bring me joy. I need to bring people in to do that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, partly. I don't think it's quite as smooth as that. I'd love to be able to take credit and say it worked that smoothly. I think most businesses, there are going to be bumps in the road. The question is, how do you handle the bumps? So probably it wasn't easy to admit that actually this wasn't my strength, because again, as an entrepreneur, you reckon I'm good at finance, I'm good at technology, I'm good at people. So to admit that something's not your strength, I think was for me a big learning curve, to say this is not my strength, and to say, I don't really enjoy it. I was happy to say that. I was happy to say this isn't my great strength, and I'm not enjoying it. And actually, it turned out to be pretty easy then to be hiring people with complementary skills. And it's a good question to look back and think, did I do that on purpose, or did I just do it just serendipity? It's funny how things work out, isn't it?
It is. It's interesting. I went to a reunion for Lynn Frank's PR on Zoom on Sunday after 30 odd years. Very interesting. And I think what Lynn was saying was, we were such a creative agency. We brought this out in people. But I was in my own mind thinking, was it just that creative people were attracted to go to that agency in the first place? Or did that agency somehow work like alchemy and kind of take some base metal and turn us all into gold? I think it's probably a bit of both, but I think it's really interesting. So
it is, but I think also, just to follow on that, I think what's interesting, it is kind of this kind of like learn something new every day kind of thing, don't you think?
And take a risk every day,
and take well, and I think part of the big success, over the years, as I look back on like setting an agency up, and I worked by myself for 10 years, you reckon, before I hired a first employee, which is really not uncommon. But I think sometimes it is done just giving yourself permission to say, yes, I'm going to do it. And I think a lot of times I just took a flyer and just said yes, and I'll figure out how to do it later.
Oh yeah, I've been around you many times, including that massive conference you had. And like, I always know that you're going to be like, how do we find a way? Let's find a way. And I love that about you. I think it's really, personally, I find that very inspiring. I don't, you've mentioned that, and I know from personal experience, I didn't have as many employees as you. I think I had 23 in the end, but they were the people that often gave me those sleepless nights. You talk about bumps in the road. What did those bumps in the road look like?
Well, and as you say, I think as the company grows, it's about, the bumps can be in terms of responsibility and authority. I think it can in terms of, I think that some of the bumps can have to do with people managing up in terms of, you've got this entrepreneur who founded the business, but fundamentally, we're just like everybody else. We still need the exact same types of things. So I think for us, I think that the big learning curve for me as well was as I did take a lot of advice over the years. So again, I had a lot of mentoring, a lot of coaching. I think in terms of addressing bumps in the road, a lot of times I think it was the ability to speak to somebody else about it. I participated in something called Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses. Do you know that one, Roz?
No, I've heard you mention that before. I'd love to know more about it.
Yeah, it's a great scheme. So it's called Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses. It's delivered in conjunction, or it was previously with the University of Oxford, and essentially it puts you in a growth group and gives you mentoring and coaching. But I think for me, it was the ability to talk to other small business owners. I think being a small business owner can be quite lonely as well, don't you think?
Oh, 100%. I think it can be very lonely, and I think it's lonely, but it's finding the help or finding your tribe, if you like. And often that tribe does come in mentoring groups or coaching groups because you're amongst peers, but peers who also want to elevate. I'm actually in that exact position at the moment.
Yeah.
Was that your experience with the Goldman Sachs?
Total Goldman Sachs, I also participated in something called Vistage, which again is the world leading organization of chief executives. So there are a number of different circles out there, but I agree with you. For me, it was partly then finding people who were willing to share experiences, and there ain't nothing new under the sun, but it was all new to me at the time, being in a high growth company.
So I just want to dial back a bit before we dial forward. What the new iteration, retirement, etc. looks like. But I want to talk a little bit about the MBO as well. You said you come from a family of mostly teachers. So how did a family or an upbringing of mostly teachers create an entrepreneur? What do you think it was in your formative years that created that mindset?
I think they're two different things. The first thing is, I have to recognize I'm in a very fortunate position that I had really supportive parents. I was one of four daughters. My parents pretty much said, you can do anything, and anything I wanted to do, my mom and dad were always there backing me up. And I think that had a lot to do with it, just in terms of that self-confidence maybe you get as a little kid. And I think I have my parents to thank for that. Now, not everybody's in that fortunate position, but I think I'm in the fortunate position to look back and say, thank you to my parents for instilling that kind of confidence. And the second thing I think is it is, in my case, timing. I happened to be getting involved in this internet bandwagon just as it was taking off big time. I was an early adopter. I was a really early player in the field in terms of ethical search engine optimization when the market was crowded with cowboys. So I think in terms of my entrepreneurial, I did have something unique, right? In hindsight, I realize now I had something unique at the time.
Yeah.
And I think that had a lot to do with growing the company.
And it's that definition of luck, isn't it? Because again, I've heard you mention luck. Somebody put this to me the other day because I'm living in this beautiful house, and I posted a picture of my garden room and said how I only worked 3.5 days, and I went, aren't you lucky? And I just put, I've worked really hard at that luck.
That's the saying, isn't it? That the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Exactly. But the definition I've heard of luck is when opportunity meets preparation. So obviously, what was the preparation? Because that was the opportunity. You were in the right place at the right time. You seized this emerging new world, this new business, this new opportunity of online internet. What was the preparation, you think, that brought you to that point?
I think it would be a combination of, and again, as you know, I am American, so there is this great myth in America that you can be what you want to be. But for me, education is often the way out. So I have a master's degree in information science. So again, I did have all of this knowledge and skill. I actually knew something that turned out to be very powerful and very useful. So I think the preparation was partly in that. I did also, before I was 38 before I set up my own company. So I think
Wow.
sometimes people are older than you think. I think I had worked at British Telecom. I had worked at Capital One. I had been a senior lecturer at the university for 8 years. So I had a lot of experience under my belt.
Yeah.
And I think for entrepreneurs, you actually have to have something that makes you different, either experience and knowledge. And I think for me, that had a lot to do with it in terms of that preparation.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily know you're doing it at the time or what it's adding up to. But that's where, I mean, that you are that perfect crossover of there's the preparation, there's the opportunity. I've seized it. Oh, aren't you lucky? So you're right. And then you keep working harder and harder at that luck.
It was also an interesting exercise, though, that when I decided to set the company up, one of the things that we had to do was sit down and figure out, my husband and me, how much money do we need?
Mm.
So we did go through really interesting exercise. There's a book about this right now called Enough. And the question is, yes, I'd recommend it. I would strongly recommend. The book is called Enough. And the idea is, how much money do you need? And I think as an entrepreneur, I was in the fortunate position to be, we did have our finances in place personally. So I knew I needed the money to pay my mortgage and feed the kids. But I think partly there is that confidence to know that even if I only worked this many days a month, there would still be enough for us to get by on.
I like that. I realized I did that exercise with Tony Robbins way back when. I went to a massive online, I did Mastery University, and there was a bit called Financial Mastery, and it was in Phoenix, Arizona, I always remember. And we did that exercise. It wasn't called that then, but yes, exactly. He was like, how much do you need to be able to, and people were like chucking out crazy amounts of money. And I think we went, $1 million, because it just seemed like a kind of a good point. And when we actually did the sums, it was 100 grand. I mean, this was back in the 90s. And suddenly to me, that was like, wow, that is really achievable. A million, that just seemed a bit crazy. But that 100,000 seemed like a really achievable amount. So I realized we must have done that, pretty much that exercise.
I think that gave me the confidence in the early days that I knew how much money did I need to earn a month. And I think also, I think I mentioned to you, I just mentioned how I wouldn't work in August, I'd take the month off, but that's then I would work like Billio in September and October to stash the cash so that I could then take that time off. But it is that was for me, that was a really important starting point.
You've mentioned that you've taken lots of advice from mentors and good people and coaches along the way. What is your criteria for identifying who those good people to work with or to work with you are?
Um, it's interesting because I think of one of the mentors I had was one of the very first when I was 23 years old. I had just moved to the United Kingdom and it was my very first job. And I realized in hindsight, it wasn't a formal mentoring or coaching relationship. So, I think it's a question of what kind of people can help you with your thinking and are interested in developing you. So I think mentoring and coaching doesn't have to just come from people who are calling themselves mentors and coaches. It's all around you. So it's about nurturing personal relationships with people who either make you feel better or give you constructive criticism in a really positive way. And I think this, it's never about taking people down a peg. It's helping them to be better at
No,
what they do.
sometimes you have to hold a mirror up, but
Yes.
you're doing it
Yeah.
from a place of kind of love and, hey, but look, let's identify this Groundhog Day behavior that's going on. And maybe then we you need to understand it, you need to own it, and then we can move on from it. So a lot of coaching and mentoring, certainly in my case, with kind of underpinned with the therapy, I am holding a mirror up. And sometimes people don't like what they're seeing, but
We've all had moments, and I have had people point things out, and that's how you learn. But it's all coming from this position where you can trust. So your question is, how did I choose a person? So sometimes I chose it through a formal network, and through a formal network, for me, the number one way is, I'm sure for you, you must get lots of recommendations. So I did listen to people who said, "Look, this is a great person to work with. You know, it just seems like you guys. It's good." So I've had recommendations. Sometimes it was just dumb luck that you met somebody and it really just clicked, and it was helpful. But again, so a lot of success, I think, isn't planned in that way. It just, again, it arises on that journey that you're on as the business grows.
There's a great coach called Dan Savage, and Dan Savage talks about the price of admission. He talks about it in the context of a relationship. I'm in a brilliant relationship. The price of admission is I have to ignore that they snore at night. That's the price I pay. Going up towards the point where your company was being sought after by other people, and then you went for the MBO, what price of admission were you paying?
That's interesting. So that as the business grew, we realized, one of the things that I learned was creating the exit strategy. So at that point, I think probably for a good 2 years, maybe 3 years, we were talking about what might exit look like. So I think we were having grown-up conversations about the exit strategy early on, but we were then approached by two companies who were interested in buying us. And this was kind of out of the blue. So it was a bit of a surprise, to the point that we did go through the due diligence and we actually had an offer on the table. Now back to your, price of admission,
Yeah.
There is going to be an earnout that you are going to have. It would
I
be,
did one. Well, I did part of one, Susan. we just
and
move on from that, but it's
I don't know anybody who's had a happy earnout.
no, it was probably the most miserable experience of my life, and the compromise agreement that cut it short was probably the most painful experience.
Hurtful, exactly. So I think I knew early on that really that an earnout was just not something that I was interested at all. And so the price of admission would be, maybe there would be lower value, but in any case, just let me out. That was it.
Brilliant.
But then the other thing then to think about is, in consultation with the other directors, they too would have to be in the earnout, and they're a lot younger than I am. So what we needed to look at is what was going to make all of us happy in terms of that exit. And I think probably getting the offer from another company accelerated the MBO the management buyout conversations with my colleagues, to say, well, either we're going to have to sell out and you're going to have to, that's all the way it is, or can we find a way forward in terms of the MBO? So it is a question of what the circumstances are at the moment. The main thing is that my plan, one bit of advice I give entrepreneurs, my financial plan was never to sell the company. So I've got my money in my pension. I've been saving my money all along. The MBO, icing on the cake.
Brilliant. That wasn't the only end game.
Totally. So that's where we had been stashing the cash in our pensions all along to ensure that we would have a lifestyle once we had exited the company.
So you were doing lots of really smart, good things about transitioning and moving on to this other place. I had a on the waterfront moment after I sold my business. It was a cupcake moment. You'll relate to this. So on the waterfront, Marlon Brando's like, I used to be a contender. I'm not anymore. That was my identity. My identity was when I was in that ring. Who am I now? And I was picking my kids up from school when I was living in the Bahamas, and somebody asked me what my favorite cupcake recipe was, an American, and I just heard myself going, I used to be the MD of a PR company. This kind of was my on the waterfront moment. How did you prepare for that transition? And how that mental identity transition of going from the CEO of this incredibly successful, dynamic, fast-moving business to this retirement that you have, and how has that panned out in reality for you?
It is worth thinking about. And as you said, I did deliberately think about it. And again, there's quite a lot written about what's happening, in your life. And the things that I took on board. The first thing is, in my mind's eye, you've got three movements in your life. So you've got that movement up until like I was 23, 24, which is kind of like your education and learning movement. And then I had 25 to now until I was, say, 60. And that was my kind of business movement. And now all of a sudden I'm 60. I still got, I hope, a good 30 years to go. And this is my next chapter in my life in terms of what else do I want to be doing? So for me, is it paying it for me? My plan for them is still paying it forward. I've been really lucky all these years. And now this is my chance to do voluntary work and advisory work and things. So in terms of preparation, over the last few years, I've been doing a lot more things outside of the agency that I founded.
Yeah.
So as you say, I serve as trustee of Nottingham Castle. And I think what I'm trying to do deliberately is not talk about who I used to be
Yes.
previously. Still me, but the question is what I want to talk to you about is what am I doing now, as opposed to what did I achieve then? And I still don't want to talk to you about cupcake recipes because I don't care about cupcake recipes.
Me neither. I'm really not at all.
Hello.
I had no FOMO about it. It's like, no.
No. And then as you say, retirement doesn't mean that I'm going to become this little old lady kind of thing. But on the other hand, I've got travel I want to do and adventures I want to do, further education, things I still want to learn. And I guess the main thing is, so the one lesson I had was consider this to be the next chapter in your life.
Yes.
Rather than always looking back. Second bit of advice that I got was called rip off the plaster. And what that means is now that I sold the company, that's done.
Yes.
Don't look back. Don't look at it. Don't meddle. Don't interfere. Don't. You've got to then move on and become who you're going to become now. Yeah. And I think that was really good advice that I got.
I think that's
just to
really
say,
good advice. Yeah.
Look forward.
And how do you celebrate this success then? What are your celebratory moments? What do you do?
What, in terms of the MBO?
Well, the life you have.
Oh, I think one thing is don't forget to count your blessings. It is grateful. If you think every morning, one time I was on a course, and the one thing I learned that was a really good thing to do every day, you have to do three things. First thing to do is to do a random act of kindness every day. Somebody comes up to the traffic light, let them out. Help somebody, whatever. Do a random act of kindness. Second thing is get some physical exercise. Get outside, walk around, be grateful in nature is the second thing. And then the third thing is an expression of gratitude every day. Every day, be grateful that the sun is shining. Although it is bloody cold here compared to Florida.
Very cold. I know, tell me.
But you're saying in terms of celebrating, I think that's been a habit that you think about habits, and that has been a habit with me for a number of years. I do think, I don't know what you think, but the whole random act of kindness thing does make you feel good.
Oh, if you go to my blog, I post about it regularly. Again, back to the 90s when I was on the Tony Robbins Mastery University. That was back in the day when that movement was founded, and we were all given cards, and we'd hand them out, and we'd do things like, I remember being on the freeway in America, and we paid for the next car.
Yes.
It's like, oh, take for the next car as well. Because they're going to turn up to the booth and they just go, oh, that person paid. So I learned that movement, in the 90s. And I think it's amazing. I mean, I heard about George Michael after he died, and what he did for people, but he never bragged about it. He wasn't public about it. They weren't so much random, but they were hidden maybe. And, I don't mind, you can be a visual philanthropist. I mean, I come from being the head of marketing for a charity, so I love philanthropists, and if they want recognition, I have no problem with that whatsoever. But sometimes that just paying it forward in that random or quiet way is so beautiful, isn't it?
It is. And again, I think of the third chapter of my life, I think of retired people who are finishing. And don't you hate the word retired?
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm reading your CV. I don't, and we're not a dissimilar age. So trust me, I'm doing a 3-year plan for myself, but it won't look like any retirement that happened, And also,
Exactly.
have you
Yeah.
tried Googling? I mean, you're from an internet background. If you Google happy retired couple, there's two things you should Google. One is woman eating salad. There's just loads of pictures of women going like this, like kind of
I'll write it down. Yeah.
orgasmic with a lettuce, So just put woman eating salad and then go to the images bit. And the other bit is, happy retired couple or even 50 plus retirement. And it's all people on P&O cruises or people running down sand dunes holding hands with really bad fitting jeans. And it's like, no, that isn't what I'm doing or planning.
No, no. So I agree with you entirely. And this whole, are you going to go on cruises? It's like, well, I didn't go on a cruise when I was younger. Why do I want to go on a cruise now? Now I want to go trekking and I want to go trekking in the Sahara. So that was one of our best holidays, was trekking in the dunes of the Sahara Desert. That was super cool. Now I'm a little bit older, so maybe I'm not going to be able to do it as well, but that's still on my list big time. And you talk about retired couples. You think of one retired power couple, Barack Obama, Barack
Yeah,
and Michelle Obama.
beautiful.
That's it. They have now finished that phase in their lives. They're now doing something else, but you still wouldn't call them retired, would you?
No. So what
But they are.
else is next for you then?
So next, as you say, we're very fortunate that we have managed to buy a second home in Florida. So we're going to be splitting our time between the UK and the United States. And then for me, again, a lot of my time I'm spent with doing two different things. Is kind of this corporate social responsibility, working with the castle, and I'm trustees of scholarships and things. Nottingham Castle is going to be super. 37 million pounds. It's going to be an amazing experience. The castle opens on the 21st of June, so I hope to be seeing you all there.
Find that, because I mean, I'm from Nottingham. I love the castle, but this is going to go all over the world, Susan. So how can people find out about? And just so you all know, Nottingham Castle, Robin Hood, 37 million pound investment. You've all got to go. So how can they find out?
So if you just Google Nottingham Castle or Nottingham Castle Trust, on the website is the information in terms of the new Robin Hood and the Rebellion Gallery and the reconstituted, there's playgrounds. It's really a friendly place for the citizens of Nottingham, and we're expecting lots of international tourists once the pandemic settles down.
Yes, of course. We'll take that. And what else is on your plan?
And then the second thing is I'm really enjoying working as a sounding board and coach for digital marketing for either marketing professionals or small business owners. And I'm in the really fortunate position I can pick and choose who I want to work with. I'm working with a very small number of clients and really, really loving it. So I'm still doing what I love. I just don't have to do it all day, every day. I don't know how that sounds to other people on this podcast, but I love what I do. I just don't want to have to do it all day, every day.
It sounds perfectly brilliant to me. If somebody wanted to work with you, how would they reach out to you, Susan?
So my name is Susan Hallam, and if you can connect with, I invite everybody to connect with me on LinkedIn. I do love LinkedIn. Otherwise, it's www.susanhallam.com.
And two final questions. One is, what's the question that you wouldn't want me to ask you? Please ask yourself and then let us know. What would that be?
Question, probably the one I'm probably most uncomfortable with. People I hate, in terms of your failures, what was the greatest failure you ever experienced? Don't you hate that? So that I was always afraid you're going to say to me, what was the worst thing? It's like, well, why would I tell you the worst thing? Why would I say that? Yeah. No, I'm not going to go there.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's great. No, I like.
I guess the failure thing for entrepreneurs, the failure thing, Roz. I think, don't you think that's the? Mm-hmm.
And look, you and I are on the same page that we learn from our failures. I used to have a sign next to my desk back in the PR days. I've learned so much from my mistakes, but I think I'll make another. But actually, it wasn't a strategy. It was like,
No.
It was like moving on, but you don't dwell on them. That's the whole point. You just see it as an outcome you didn't want.
Exactly. Or I think probably what I do mentally is I don't consider it a failure anymore.
Exactly.
I think failures to me are things I haven't managed to get over in some way.
Yeah.
Maybe that's perhaps, yeah, yeah.
I hear you. I hear you. And if you had your monkey brain, so that part of you that talks to you and drives you on, if you had to give it a name or give it an identity, what would you give that?
For me, it's always kind of nag, 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 isn't there? So there's that quiet voice. So for me, it's the nag, that
Mm.
nag, nag thing. And, in terms of, are you working hard enough, and are you prepared enough, and are you earning enough? So it's that kind of nag, nag thing, which I guess probably is coming. There's so many voices that you experience all your life. It's probably that aggregation of all these different kind of things that you built up over the course of your life. But for me, it's the nag.
It's called the internal corrections, obviously. You're absolutely right. It's like we take it externally and then we start to bring it internally. But it sounds like you've put yours in a lovely bed of straw and it's quite bedded down now because you sound like you've created that balance. Would that be true?
I think the main thing is that I think what I've learned to do is recognize it for what it is. So I'm never going to get rid of the nag, but I guess the question is how can you get quiet it enough down to know that everything's good, everything. And I think it's always that I think that natural optimism is probably the characteristic of an entrepreneur as well, that you do learn to focus on the good, focus on the good news rather than on the nag who's at the back of your mind in the dark hours at night.
Susan, I could talk to you all day. I really could.
Oh, it's lovely, Roz. I've enjoyed it. Thanks again for inviting me.
And I hope I haven't asked the same old questions that.
Nah, super cool conversation. I enjoyed it. It's good to reflect. Everybody should have the chance to be on your podcast. It's a great chance to reflect back on your career.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. So our mutual loving will end, but thank you again. My guest today has been Susan Hallam. I'll post details of how you can get in touch with Susan if you want that incredibly high level mentor or coach in the digital area. And also, I'm really excited about everything you're involved in, paying it forward. I look forward to seeing the new Nottingham Castle when we can, and to everything else that you go on to, Susan. So it's been an absolute delight, and I look forward, because I know this is going to be just one of a series, I look forward to our next conversation sometime in the future. So thank you, Susan Hallam.
Me too. Thanks again then, Roz. Thanks again.
I've been Rosalind Palmer, and you've been listening to Monkey Business.